9:04. Good morning, guys. I'm just going to wait a few minutes and see who all shows up and try to figure out why my waiting room does not exist right now. Our bell is a little bit early, so I'm going to wait another minute. There's Rosie. Waiting room. I don't know what that means. Whatever. Okay. Let's get attendance taken. We have Charles. Virtually present. We will have Jordan. There's Lucas. There's Paulo. No Amity yet. And no Tavion yet.
So the class periods start at the same time they did last year.
Yes, they do.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, virtually present. I'm just trying to figure out how we have like new codes for attendance. So flu for students who do not attend Zoom. Virtually present for people who do.
How does that even work if you don't even have the flu?
I know. I think it's super weird. I guess just because like if you're not present, then maybe just the fact that we're having to be virtual because of the flu is a thing. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what they've told us to do. So I think Tavion is the only one that is missing. I mean, Jordan, but he told me that he'll be a little bit late. So feels weird to wait. Flu is not an option anymore. What? Do we mark them as COVID? Yeah, we mark them as COVID. That seems kind of mean. My mom has COVID right now. She told me the other day, and she figured it out because she woke up and she was like, "Oh, I can't really like smell or taste anything." And she was upset about that. But then she tried to eat a Reese's pumpkin and couldn't taste it. And she was like, "This is the saddest thing.
Well,
I got to get tested if I can't taste a Reese's pumpkin." So poor thing. She'll be all right.
yeah, I saw a video where you have to like literally like boil an orange until it's like burnt, and then you smell it, and then it magically your scent comes back.
Really?
Yeah, I saw some video that and it supposedly worked. So
Like boil it until it's really gross?
yeah, so it looks like literally like it's burnt, like half of it's burnt, and then suppose it smells horrible. So your nose is like, well, I can smell now or whatever.
Okay. Well, I have to text my mom and let her know. It was an orange. The first thing that she had that she was like, "Oh, I can't smell or taste this." So maybe there's something to that. I think she said she was like being able to taste and smell a little bit better now, but still got COVID. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna share my screen. Oh, and here comes Jordan. We are going to look at the, nope, not this. This is not for you. This is for you. Okay, so we are going to, are you in a rocking chair with coffee? That looks so cozy. I wish I was in a rocking chair with coffee. I bought a new coffee maker for my room and then I forgot to bring coffee with me. So what a dum-dum.
Rip.
I know. I'm gonna go home after this period and bring my coffee with me. Okay, so we're gonna look at imagery. The last couple of weeks we looked at diction and then we looked at detail. And I feel like there's some overlap between detail and imagery because sometimes strong imagery is the detail that we're using. So we're gonna look at this part of this poem, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is a very famous poem. If you've ever heard, and maybe you haven't, but if you ever heard about people saying that like a burden they have is like an albatross around their neck, that's what this is from. Or this is what that's from. But we're just going to read these couple of stanzas and then we're going to look at the mariner's changing attitude towards the creatures of the sea. So we're going to look at the difference in the first stanza and the second stanza. And see what imagery reveals the change in attitude. Okay. The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and 1,000,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire, blue, glossy green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. Okay. There is some good imagery in there. So these two stanzas show the mariner's changing attitude towards the creatures of the sea. What is his attitude in this first stanza, and what image is the thing that shows his attitude?
Slimy things.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of attitude is that showing?
Disgust.
I would say so. Yeah.
Then the next one, it's almost intrigue.
Yeah. Yeah, it says like what imagery shows his attitude in this second one. And there is a good bit of imagery here. You say intrigue. Anybody have any other descriptions? Like, what do you think this attitude is?
No.
I think intrigue is definitely a good one, particularly since it says within the shadow, I watched the rich attire. He's like looking at their, he says attire. It's probably just what they look like because we don't really know from this context like what kind of creatures he's looking at, but lots of color, lots of movement, almost like admiration, I would say. So tomorrow you can go ahead and be thinking about this. Think of a cat or a dog. You could actually think about any kind of animal that you can describe easily, and you're going to write a description that reveals a positive attitude towards the animal and then a description that reveals a negative attitude. The looks can't change, but only your attitude does, and you should use imagery to create those descriptions. So be thinking about that. Think about what kind of animal you could potentially think of with two different attitudes. I'm thinking like, oh, I might write one about this this naked hedgehog. It doesn't have spines on it, and it's so gross to look at, but it's also kind of adorable. It has to get these like oil massages a few times a day because the skin is so sensitive since it doesn't have spines. That would be a good one. Okay, so today we're going to just look at some rhetorical analysis essays. I don't think this will take the whole time, but one of the great resources that we have as AP teachers is that we have all the previous tests that have been given in past years, and we have sample essays that students have actually written, not our students, not Allegro students, but just some students. We don't know who they are. And they'll usually give us one that's really good, one that's kind of in the middle, and one that is not good at all. So we're going to look at the question. I think this was from 2017. Yes. And we're going to look at the question first, and then we'll look at, I think we'll probably look at the good one and the bad one. We might not look at the middle one. This is on Canvas, but I just wanted to open it in my thing. Okay, so Claire Booth Luce, yes. I tend to read the same ones every year, so I'm familiar with this. Okay, so this is a passage that was an opening speech made in 1960 by American journalist and politician Claire Booth Luce to journalists at the Women's National Press Club. So already we kind of know about her audience and what credibility she has. She's a journalist and politician. In this speech, Luce went on to criticize the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of the perceived public demand for sensationalist stories. So you read this and then analyze how she uses this introduction to prepare the audience for her message. So this is really only the introduction of her speech, but this is how she's kind of getting the audience ready to hear what she's going to be talking about. So we're analyzing, or the people whose essays we're reading are analyzing how she uses it to prepare the audience for her message. So I'm just going to read through this, and then we'll look at the other examples, the sample essays. I am happy and flattered to be a guest of honor on this always exciting and challenging occasion. But looking over this audience tonight, I am less happy than you might think and more challenged than you could know. I stand here at this rostrum invited to throw rocks at you. You have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, the American press. The subject not only is of great national significance, but also has, one should say, infinite possibilities and infinite perils to the rock thrower. For the banquet speaker who criticizes the weakness and pretensions or exposes the follies and sins of his listeners, even at their invitation, does not generally evoke an enthusiastic, no less a friendly response. The delicate art of giving an audience hell is always one best left to the Billy Grahams and the Bishop Sheens. And in case you don't know who those people are, we have this little footnote here. Billy Graham, an American Christian evangelist, he was probably like the most famous preacher of the 20th century. And Fulton John Sheen, an American Catholic archbishop, both became renowned for their religious oratory. Their speeches were widely broadcast on radio and television. I've never heard of Sheen, but I didn't grow up Catholic, so that's probably why. But you are an audience of journalists. There's no audience anywhere who should be more bored, indeed more revolted, by a speaker who tried to fawn on it, butter it up, exaggerate its virtues, play down its faults, and who would more quickly see through any attempt to do so. I ask you only to remember that I am not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. For what is good journalism all about? On a working, finite level, is the effort to achieve illuminating candor in print and to strip away cant. It is the effort to do this not only in matters of state, diplomacy, and politics, but also in every smaller aspect of life that touches the public interest or engages proper public curiosity. It's the effort to explain everything from a summit conference to why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does when it's fully risen above the heavens. It is the effort, too, to describe the lives of men and women, big and small, close at hand or thousands of miles away, familiar in their behavior, or unfamiliar in their idiosyncrasies. It is, to use the big word, the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. No audience knows better than an audience of journalists that the pursuit of the truth and the articulation of it is the most delicate, hazardous, exacting, and inexact of tasks. Consequently, no audience is more forgiving, I hope, to the speaker who fails or stumbles in his own pursuit of it. The only failure this audience could never excuse in any speaker would be the failure to try to tell the truth as he sees it about his subject. In my perilous but earnest effort to do so here tonight, I must begin by saying that if there's much that is wrong with the American press, there is also much that's right with it. I know then that you will bear with me, much as it may go against your professional grain, if I ask you to accept some good with the bad, even though it may not make such good copy for your newspapers. For the plain fact is that the US daily press today is not inspiringly good. It is just far and away the best press in the world. Okay, so if we are going to talk about how she uses this to prepare the audience for her message, you're going to want to think about like, what tactics is she using? What strategies is she employing? Right when I read it, the first thing that I think about is her tone, because it's almost kind of combative right off the bat. She is even saying like, I'm going to throw rocks at you. I think there's a lot of examples of that throughout the passage. I would probably also talk about how, despite the combative tone, she forms a connection with the audience. She's a journalist and she is talking to a lot of journalists. So they have a lot in common and she finds this common ground. Can anybody think of anything else that you just noticed through this first read through that stuck out to you?
That she's almost like trying to brace people, like letting, or right off the bat telling them not to do the things that many journalists do, like take a stance of combativeness and defensiveness and just listen, because I guess her job here is to, well, she said it in the first paragraph, to like sort of, call out the press.
Mhm.
And if they're going to really absorb it, they have to not be defensive about it. So she's just going out and telling them that.
Yeah, and I like the way you said that she's almost like bracing them for the message they're about to hear. Yeah, that's definitely something that you could, if you were writing the essay, which you're not going to, by the way. If you were writing the essay, you could write about that. Paulo, are you disappointed that you're not going to be writing an essay about this?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely disappointed. I'm so sad.
I thought you would be. But that's okay. Don't worry, we will be writing another essay, but not this week. I like to give you a little bit of time between. So what we're going to do is look at the good example, and we're going to just notice like, what did this person do that earned them all the points that they earned? What's good about this essay, and then we're going to look at one that is not so good and see what we think is not very good about it. I don't think we're going to look at the one in the middle, but we'll see. But before we do that, I just want to say, I did grade your essays over the weekend, but PowerSchool didn't save them for some reason. So I have to go back and put in all your grades. But I started doing a thing with like half of you. I graded the first 2 or 3 essays and made a lot of comments, because I think that particularly in this class, a lot of feedback is really helpful. And then I was like, this is just taking so long. Could we I was like, could I cut down on how much time it takes to grade these things if I do audio comments? So I just I like read through an essay really quickly, thought about some things I wanted to tell you, and then recorded myself giving commentary through the whole thing. So let me know how you feel about that, those of you who actually got that this time. I like it, but I don't know if you'll like it, because you're sitting listening to me talk about your essay for like 5 minutes. So just let me know how you feel about it. Okay. Oh, and that being said, I was really impressed with some of y'all's essays. And hopefully that comes across in my comments. I feel like the first essay that we write in this class can kind of go either way. And sometimes it shows that, boy, we've got a lot of work to do. And sometimes I feel like, oh, good, we have all the building blocks we need. We just have to like shape things up a little bit. And I felt really good about quite a few of you. So I left feeling good. I even like texted Miss Kate and I was like, can I brag on this kid and this kid? Like, oh, feel good about it. So that's good.
That's only 2 kids.
You don't know how many. So let's look at these essays that did well. Keep in mind, this is the end of the year that these are being written. These are for the actual exam. So I would love to tell you this made a 5 or a 6 or whatever, but we used to, the scale used to be different. It was 1 to 9 rather than 1 to 6. So I don't really know how those convert exactly. Okay, so this is the good one. And let's just read it and see how this person did. Up here it says 1 of 4, that's 4 pages, which seems kind of long, but this person's handwriting is pretty big. So, and also sometimes I struggle through reading these handwritten things. They're not always, this is actually okay. This is not bad writing, but some of them are tough. The speech given by Claire Booth Luce to the Women's National Press Club was controversial and even condemning of her audience. However, Luce pulls it off by gently preparing the audience for the criticism. She employs the fact that they invited her there to speak, a strong consideration for their feelings, praises of their profession, and a clear plea for open-mindedness. So just like, let's take a look at this intro real quick. There's not like a hugely powerful hook, but that's okay. She starts out by explaining who it is and kind of what her tone is. And it's almost like the intro is her whole thesis, or like the whole intro is her thesis. She pulls it off by doing these things, employing the fact that they invited her, strong consideration for their feelings, praises their profession, clear plea for open-mindedness. So I'm expecting to see all of these things addressed in the body of her essay. She opens the speech with a paradox about being happy and challenged, first saying she is flattered and honored, then flips her original statement saying she is less happy than you may think. Right off the bat, she gives her audience signs that her speech is not going to be 100% positive, but then she makes sure to remind them that they have asked for her opinion on what is wrong with the American press. Within her first paragraph, Luce makes her intentions clear before even stating her argument, and she confirms that they're aware they asked for this criticism. One thing I want to point out before we continue is that she is using references to the speech a lot. She's got a few quotes here, but she always explains why she's using that quote. And that can be a tough thing to do. I see a lot of just plugging in quotes and kind of expecting that whoever's reading it will make the connection on their own. But you should be showing us what the connection is. Like when she says this, right off the bat, she gives her audience signs that her speech is not going to be positive. She confirms that they're aware. So she's always analyzing, like, why does she make this choice? She's not just recapping, Luce said this, then she said that. We don't need that because we all have access to what she said. We don't need to just completely recap it. In the second paragraph, Luce uses self-deprecation to show her audience the difficult situation she's in. She acknowledges her own position, which exposes the follies and sins of her listeners. Luce gives them a slight idea of the criticism that is to come by comparing herself to an arbitrary banquet speaker who shares the same difficult task. Next, Luce employs some humor by saying that she is not the best candidate for the delicate art of giving an audience hell, but rather perhaps public figures Billy Graham and Bishop Sheens would succeed at it. Her lighthearted and self-deprecating approach makes the audience more likely to accept her claims, or at least hear her out. And again, right there, that's a good example of this is what she said, and this was what the effect of it was. And you always have to make sure to show what that effect is. As Luce continues her speech, she again reminds them of her invitation and then prepares them for harsh words by complimenting their careers and their statements of writing, standards of writing. She warns them that it's not to be sugarcoated because they are an audience of journalists and they would all see through any attempt to do so. Her praise of their intelligence automatically pleases the audience and makes them more willing to listen to the argument. Through the final sections of her introduction, Luce carefully plants the definition of journalism, the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. While this statement pertains to her overall argument that journalists do not always state the truth, she does not outright accuse them of this. Instead, she merely introduces a commonly shared opinion on journalism. By waiting to argue it further, Luce gets her audience on board that truthfulness and honesty are their primary concerns. If the audience agrees with this statement, then she will have already won half the battle to showing them journalism's faults. I really like the end of that paragraph. Again, she has said, like, this is what Luce said, but here's the point of it. And if you'll remember, the question we're answering is, how does she get her audience on board for her bigger speech? How does this introduction serve to appeal to them and get them on board? And she directly answers this question. She gets her audience on board by waiting to argue it further, proving that truthfulness and honesty are their primary concerns. And if the audience agrees with that, then she will have won half the battle. So that's a really good analysis. Let's see her conclusion here. Luce is creative, careful, and aware when presenting her opening statements. She prepares the audience well by being appealing to their feelings, being considerate, and through a plea for open-mindedness. Also, just to point it out, if you're doing this by hand, which I think you will be this year, you can write things like space, and they don't care. That's totally fine. So I feel like the conclusion is fine. It's not amazing, but it does wrap it up. And I think for several of y'all, when I read your essays over the weekend, I was like, the conclusion is the toughest part. I'm just flipping down because we can see what they said about it. She got an 8 out of 9. And it says it effectively analyzes how she uses the introduction of her speech to prepare the audience for the message. She develops, I assume she's a she, I don't know why, I just think the person who wrote this was female. The essay develops an effective analysis with evidence and explanations that include a convincing explanation of the rhetorical context. Opening paragraph presents a series of choices that she makes to prepare the audience. Second paragraph effectively explains her paradox about being happy and challenged and convincingly analyzes how she makes her intentions clear. Third paragraph presents an effective analysis of her self-deprecation and humor. Fifth paragraph presents a convincing and appropriate analysis of journalists' shared concern for truthfulness and honesty. Additionally, this paragraph explains how Luce invokes journalists' duty to state the truth to prepare the audience for her criticism. Despite occasional flaws, the essay consistently demonstrates control of the elements of effective writing. So that's pretty good. Back when we were on a 9-point scale, it was very rare to find a 9. And a 9 was the one that, like, you did everything you needed to do and the writing was just incredibly good, or you made like some kind of very cool connection that most people wouldn't think of, something that kind of like blew your reader's mind. So that doesn't happen very often, but this person did everything they were supposed to do and they did it well. I'm just going to take a look. Okay, so this other one we're going to look at scored a 4 out of 9, which isn't as bad as some, but I want to know, I'm just going to read this, and then I want you guys to tell me why you think it didn't score higher. Claire Booth Luce seems to be a passionate journalist who wants the world to hear the truth and for the press to tell it. Luce uses persuasive rhetoric to influence her listeners to be honest with the American people. Luce starts her speech by telling the audience she is honored to be there, as many, I don't know what that says, as many do before a speech, in order to tell the audience she wants to talk to them and that she's ready to give her points. Luce then says, I am less happy than you might think and more challenged than you could know. Saying this lets us know that she is about to point out a weakness or a flaw that's bothering her. She says that she is a rock thrower to the press, referencing in the late BCs and early ADs how adulterers and sinners would be shamed and beat with rocks being thrown at them. This makes a metaphor for how she's about to reveal and shame the press's weaknesses. Luce says that there's no audience who should be more revolted at a speaker buttering them up, because as journalists, they should want the truth instead of a too kind praise. She says that the press's job is to correctly inform the people, whether it be about a summit conference or why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does when it's fully risen. Doing this shows her audience that they are truth seekers and they should want to tell the less informed citizens the truth and the important events happening. Throughout all the negative she says about the press, she stops completely draining their spirits and says that with the much that is wrong with the American press, there's also much that is right with it. She says it is understandable that they may not want to listen to her, but encourages them to stick around and listen. Luce asks them to accept good and bad, giving the journalists a balance, and even though it may not make a good copy of the newspaper, they should be honest with the people. Luce uses a well-spoken rhetoric to influence all listening to be a more honest writer. With her clever uses, she conveys that they should do their job the way it was meant to be done. Okay, so why do you think that this didn't score any higher than it did?
It's too cool. It uses too much like colloquialisms.
Okay.
She's too nonchalant with the phrases, like she doesn't know what else to say, which can be bad because it's an AP English class essay. So if you can't, formulate the right word choice, then you're not going to score well.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously, this was on the old system, 1 to 9, but on this new scale, 1 to 6, this person would not get the sophistication point. And I think that's kind of what you're pointing at. Like, it's not sophisticated writing. What about just her or his argument or organization, anything like that?
It's all right, but it's nothing to write home about.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the intro, and it says she uses persuasive rhetoric to influence her listeners to be honest with the American people. I guess that's her thesis. What's wrong with it? Any ideas?
Well, I guess all right, you can go.
No, I'm just a little confused too. Like,
I just think it's kind of weak. It's like she's just sort of throwing words at us that she's heard before, like persuasive rhetoric. I don't think she truly analyzed the essay and found any evidence of persuasive rhetoric. I think that's just words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Persuasive rhetoric. It's not that she doesn't use persuasive rhetoric. She does, but like, what are some examples of that? This person doesn't tell us.
Exactly.
Whereas the first person whose essay we looked at talked about like her self-deprecating humor and her connection with the journalists, all these things, which don't have to be buzzwords. And I think you're totally right about that, Jordan, that she's like, oh, persuasive rhetoric sounds good. That's an AP English term. Let's throw that in there. But she doesn't really have anything to like back that up.
And also I think she or he like went into this essay and wrote the intro first, but their mind wandered throughout writing the bodies. So instead of having what's the adjective for continuity? Like, is it continuous?
Continuous.
All right, yeah. Instead of having a continuous essay with a solid like main point, it wanders, and the stuff she shows in the body does not relate to her thesis at all.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. And I bet when we scroll down and look what they said about her, they will probably mention that. You're absolutely right. She doesn't really, even though she's got several individual paragraphs, I don't really know what they're talking about. Like, I don't really see what the focus is of these paragraphs. And I think one huge mistake that she makes, and I may have said this in some of y'all's comments on your essays, particularly about like individual paragraphs that do this, but one thing you always have to be conscientious about is not letting the passage do the argument for you. not relying so heavily on quotes that your argument's lost in it. You want to make your argument the strongest thing and then use the context to support it. And this person, honestly, I got tired of saying she says, she says, she says, because that's what a ton of this essay is. It's just recapping what Luce said in the speech, which we don't need to recap it. We all read it. And also, she just doesn't have an argument of her own. She does occasionally say stuff like, saying this lets us know that she's about to point out a weakness or flaw that's bothering her. Okay.
Yeah, but stuff like that, that's bothering her, like, that's, sorry, I just,
No, it's fine.
sometimes unsophisticated stuff pisses me off.
Me too. No, I totally get it. If there was a bigger point there, that might be okay. Like, saying this lets us know she's about to point out a weakness or flaw that's bothering her. If she had a bigger plan there, like if her tone seemed really bothered or something like that, if she was leading into a bigger point,
It would have made sense, but it's just some term she's throwing in there, which,
yeah,
it's like half of the things she says after a quote are just filler words to meet the length requirements.
that's exactly how it felt to me too. And so, which is interesting because sometimes when I'm reading these sample essays, it's always synthesis first because it takes the longest time, and then rhetorical analysis, and then argument. So sometimes I'll get to the argument sample essays that people have written, and I'll be like, oh, I think this person was probably running out of time and just try to get something down on paper. But this is in the middle. I feel like this person should have had more time, but maybe they were just like, I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna like put some crap on a paper and see what happens. And that's better than not writing anything. But let's see what they said about this person. This essay inadequately analyzes how Luce uses the introduction of her speech to prepare the audience for her message, starting with a vague, terse opening paragraph. In the second paragraph, the first example of Luce's words is misrepresented as Luce's intention to point out a weakness or flaw that's bothering her. The paragraph then offers an unconvincing explanation for her rock thrower analogy. The third and fourth paragraphs consist mostly of vague, insufficient paraphrases of Luce's speech. Yeah, that's my biggest issue with it. Overall, the essay inadequately represents Luce's strategies, whether by misrepresenting them or by failing to sufficiently analyze them. The prose mostly conveys the student's ideas, but does not consistently control the elements of writing. It's another way of saying this is unsophisticated. So kind of, there's a lot of things going on there. Like, this person did try, they did talk about what they were supposed to talk about, but it just wasn't effective. She didn't analyze it very effectively. She didn't have good examples. She did way too much quoting or paraphrasing, not really coming across with her own argument, which is a big mistake. I'm just gonna take a quick look. I don't think we would even really have time to get through the third one, and that's okay. Oh, it's also very hard to read, so we're gonna skip that. Okay, so really I just wanted to give you guys an example of what these essays sort of should look like and see some common pitfalls that people fall into. Obviously, like relying too heavily on quotes and paraphrasing, that's a big mistake. Not having your thoughts organized. Unsophisticated writing, that's one that I feel like it's so tough to teach you to do that better, because some people are just naturally really gifted writers and some people naturally are not. But I think you'll all be fine, because I think if you're in AP, then you're a good enough student and a good enough writer that somebody recommended you to be in here. So I want you to just kind of keep those things in mind when we get our next essay assignment, which will be next week. Yeah. I'm just kind of looking ahead at my plans. I was going to tell you this tomorrow, but I think I'll go ahead and tell you today. honestly, this class has not been that bad about it, which is great. But starting off this year, I have not had the best rate of turning in work. And I don't want anybody to get behind and really let stuff pile up on them. And honestly, like while we were virtual last year, that was a big problem that I saw, particularly in AP, because there is a lot of work in AP and like a lot of bigger assignments, a lot of writing assignments. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna like really crack down on due dates next week. I'm not gonna crack down on due dates this week. So if there's anything that you have not turned in yet, if you get it turned in by next Monday, I won't count it late. I haven't counted anything late so far this year. But starting next week, I'll kind of review the late work policy and then we're going to stick to it. But I don't want anybody to start off this year like in the hole or having a lot of stuff pile up on you. So that's it for today. We still have 12 minutes left, but I'm just going to let you guys go. Any questions? Anything for the good of the group? Nope.
No.
Okay. See you tomorrow then.
Is it always going to be a
Yeah.
stay on this long class?
Like, I feel like it kind of varies. Yeah, like some days I'll just like come in and give you the assignment and let you work on your own if you want.
All right. See you tomorrow.
See ya.